In the previous lecture, we discussed how to use events in Vue. Another set of events are keyboard events. Vue provides a lot of out-of-the-box in terms of keyboard event support. We can trigger an event on any set of keys or on a specific key. Let's look at an example. Let's say we wanted to add a field for a middle name. Inside the data object, we're going to add a new property called middle name. Its initial value will be an empty string. We'll update the full name function to include the middle name. The next step is to create an input field that will allow the user to update the middle name. Inside the document, in between the first and last name fields, we'll insert a new input element. Here's what we want to do. Rather than change the value on input, I want to change the value whenever the user presses the Enter key on their keyboard. We're going to listen for an event called keyUp. We'll want to invoke a function called updateMiddleName if the event is triggered. This function doesn't exist. We'll have to create it inside the methods object. Let's do that next. Inside the function, we're going to update the middle name data property with the value of the input field. The keyUp event we're using is triggered every time a user presses a key and then releases it. This means that the function is invoked on every key release. We're looking to limit which key will trigger the event. We only want to invoke the function if the key released was the Enter key. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to the Keyboard Modifiers documentation page. Keyboard modifiers work similar to event modifiers. They modify how an event works, but with keyboard inputs. It's completely optional to use keyboard modifiers. By using them, you can listen for a specific key. Out of the box, they even provide some aliases for certain keys. You can find the full list in the documentation. They even have an alias for the Enter key. Let's use it. In the template, after the event, we'll add the Enter key modifier. If we were to test the input on the page, nothing would happen. The full name updates the second I press the Enter key. Typically, you would check for something like this with conditional statements. Vue takes a different approach by using modifiers to make things cleaner and simpler. There are times where we'll need to use a key that doesn't have an alias. In cases like these, we can use the code assigned to a key by the browser. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to a site that will tell you the key code for any key. If I press Enter, I'll be presented with information about the key I pressed. In a huge font size, I'll be provided a number to represent the key I pressed. However, this is not the key code we need. The code we'll want to use is provided in the corner. The difference between the two is the number is deprecated in most browsers. The key code in the code box is the official code we need to use in our application. We won't be using this code because Vue sets an alias for the Enter key. If we were using a different key that didn't have an alias, we would use the key code in this box. Key modifiers are not limited to keyboard events. For example, let's say for the decrement function, we only want to trigger the function if the user clicks the button while holding the Control key. That's easy to pull off. Switch over to the documentation for a moment. Under the alias keys, there's a section called System Modifiers. This is a list of aliases for a set of keys we can use as modifiers. The modifier we'll want to use is called Control. Let's switch back to the editor. Inside the template, we're going to attach a modifier to the click event. The name of the modifier is called Control. As you would expect, the expression inside will execute if the user is holding down the Control key while clicking on the decrement button. Let's give it a test. After refreshing the page, we should check the console for errors. There are none this far. If I click the decrement button, the age does not decrement. After pressing the Control key, does the value decrement like we want? So that's how you would use keyboard modifiers with events. We can use modifiers for events outside of keyboard events. Before I end this lecture, I'm going to revert this change. I'm not interested in having the decrement button only work if the Control key is pressed down.